the whitetail deer is the hardest big game animal to get on any consistent level. If we're talking about like a pressured, large hunting area, it's like in most of the hunting world, in my experience, animals can be purchased, right? You can pay to go on a sheep hunt. Now you're not always successful, but a lot of the times you are. Mm-hmm. You can pay and go do a leopard hunt, and 99% of the time you're successful. But the whitetail deer has always been one of the hardest big game animals. And I don't know that there's many guides out there, unless you're like in a Texas or a really hyper managed area, that could guarantee you a mature whitetail buck.
I was like, well, if I throw a mic on, then I can help others the way that these people have all helped me.
Born in the heart of the Pennsylvania deer camp, with the help of experts, friends, and local legends, we bring you valuable knowledge and powerful stories for your hunting adventures. Welcome to the East Meets West Hunt Podcast with your host, Beau Martonik.
All right, we're live. Joe Miles, welcome to the podcast.
Man, thank you so much. Humbled and very appreciative for the opportunity to be here, Beau. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to talk to you. We've met now a few times. Got to meet. I think the first time was at the Great American Outdoor Show, maybe last year, 2 years ago, something like that, and got to meet. And anyone that I am, we have a lot of mutual friends, and everyone speaks very highly of you, and also from just how long you've been hunting, whitetail hunting specifically, but hunting in general, traveling, everything. It's pretty an impressive resume. So.
No, man, thank you very much. Yeah, we've got a great industry with a bunch of cool dudes, so I absolutely love it.
Yeah, that is. We were talking a little bit prior to this about, how lucky we are to be able to work in this space and be around awesome people, and then just get to do a bunch, and a lot of it being also tax write-offs for us, so can't complain.
That was off the air conversation, which is always good conversation. But yes, working in the space lets the passion. There are some, mechanical financial advantages there. We'll say that. Yes.
That's a good way of putting it. I'm gonna have to start learning some of that terminology, but
yeah,
for sure. Well, Joe, before we get kind of kicked off here, if you wouldn't mind kind of giving a little bit of a background on who you are. It's funny because, again, I've known your name and I've seen your stuff for longer, well before I had met you. But I feel like I'm learning a lot of things that you've done and places you've been and stuff, and a well-traveled man, and have done a bunch. So if you wouldn't mind giving a little bit of a background on yourself.
No, for sure, man. Grew up a very humble blue-collar family, great family. Mom and dad were very supportive, played a lot of sports growing up, played baseball in college, and my father was, I've said this multiple times, was an absolute whitetail savage. I mean, he lived, breathed, slept from August 15th to January 1st. That was our season. Every single weekend we hunted. One of my earliest childhood memories in the field is I woke up in a sleeping bag in the middle of the woods, and a piece of candy hit me in the top of the head. I was scared to death, and I looked up, and my dad's got his 30-06, and he's like 6 or 8 feet up in the crook of a tree sitting there. He had gotten me out of my bed in a sleeping bag, taken me to the woods, let me sleep under the stand. And so we did that multiple times, and I just went everywhere with him and got my start whitetail hunting super early. He was not a traveling guy. We had a lease down in the southern part of South Carolina, and then ended up with a farm over on the Georgia side of the Savannah River. And it was all, within 2.5 hours of our house. That's where we did all of our hunting. And I think he took me on one duck hunting trip to Maryland when I was probably 13 or 14. And that was really the only out-of-state hunt we ever did. And I just was in love with whitetail hunting, started bow hunting at 15, 16 years old, and put the rifle up and Had a fascination with Africa. That was a big fascination that I had. And when I got out of school, sports, baseball didn't end up working out for a long-term career type thing. So I really wanted to do the Africa thing. So went over there, worked really hard to get an apprenticeship going, and ended up working over there out of college for 7 years and ended up getting my professional hunter's license. I was able to guide in Mozambique, did some dangerous game hunts for leopard, elephant, buffalo, a lot of plains game stuff. And my wife and I had a kid, and my plan, and we talked about things looking good on paper. My plan was to guide African hunting for 6 months out of the year and then come home and sell safaris for 6 months out of the year. That was my plan. But as you get older and develop a family, have a kid, those plans obviously changed. So I started a business called Sporting Adventures International, where we basically broker or book hunts, in Africa, in Argentina. We do that. And bow hunting whitetail, again, always my absolute passion. So no more guiding in Africa, but I still go over there quite a bit. I'm actually leaving Monday. I'm not sure when this is going to air, but I'm leaving to head back over there Monday. And started Sporting Adventures. I'm backtracking a little bit here, but started Sporting Adventures, and it started paying some of the bills. And then I got into some vacation rental property business in Central America, Mexico, Argentina, and started doing that. It's a company called Primus Villas, and we got that going. And so it's been it's obviously different than guiding, not exactly what I had anticipated doing, but it's been good. And, just always I don't know, man. And you have the same thing. And a lot of your listeners have the same thing. It's just something about the whitetail deer. I just keep coming back and back and back. Yeah. I've been fortunate, done the sheep stuff, done the elk stuff, mountain goats, a lot of international stuff, but I just keep coming back to the grassroots whitetail hunting. And I'm going to jump around a little bit more here, but Bobby and I, Worthington, teach a whitetail class at his home farm or his home place in Pikeville, Tennessee. And he talks about how a lot of guys talk about the whitetail deer is the hardest big game animal to get on any consistent level. If we're talking about like a pressured, large hunting area, it's like in most of the hunting world, in my experience, animals can be purchased, right? You can pay to go on a sheep hunt. Now you're not always successful, but a lot of the times you are. Mm-hmm. You can pay and go do a leopard hunt, and 99% of the time you're successful. But the whitetail deer has always been one of the hardest big game animals. And I don't know that there's many guides out there, unless you're like in a Texas or a really hyper managed area, that could guarantee you a mature whitetail buck. So anyway, a lot there, but whitetail, man, has just been my jam, if you will, for as long as I can remember.
That's crazy. I've never heard it put that way, about when you first were saying about, whitetail being the hardest to be able to kill, essentially. At first I was like, man, I don't know if I don't know if I agree with that, just from the look. But then once you explained it that way, that 100% makes sense. As far as like, even on the best places, you're not guaranteed a mature buck to be able to go through, whether you're paying for it or you're managing the farms yourself or not.
Yeah, and that's not always and never, two words that you never say in hunting, right? I mean, that phrase gets beat up and thrown around all the time. I mean, I'm sure there's guys that elk hunt the backcountry in Colorado that'll be listening to this podcast and go, man, you're full of it. Come out here and give it a shot. And they're right. They're 100% right. Depending on your circumstances, any of it can be extremely difficult. Yep. But in my experience, having done a lot of the elk, a lot of the sheep, a lot of the Africa stuff, is still like pressured whitetail bucks for mature deer. It's got to be one of the hardest, if not the hardest, in my experience.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute total sense. And so you grew up, and do you still live in South Carolina?
Yeah, Columbia, South Carolina. Actually, live on the street I grew up on, if you can believe that. My wife and I got married, and we moved just outside of Columbia, and then moved back to Columbia, South Carolina. And there was a house available, basically catty corner to the house I grew up on. So all my neighbors from when I was a kid, they were like putting fences up and all kind of stuff to try and keep me out now that I was back in the neighborhood.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. I had it's funny when you said South Carolina and learning to deer hunt there. I've never deer hunted in South Carolina, but everything I've heard, it's really difficult. It's hard hunting. And I remember when I was doing, probably might have been 4 years ago now, I was doing some research work for Spartan Forge when they were building stuff in their Intel tab. And it was basically me going through state websites, pulling data, things to be able to input into the app. And there was South Carolina's website cracked me up because it had something to say about with Boone and Crockett whitetails, and it was just basically like, if this is where you want to come hunt this, like, you should go somewhere else. Like, it said it very blunt, and it just made me laugh because none of the other websites that was talking about trophy potential was like, we got some mature deer here and stuff, but if you're looking for real big bucks, I'd go somewhere else.
Yeah, well, they're right. Our season comes in August 15th. Rifle season comes in August 15th, goes to January 1st. Oh. I'm sure somebody can correct me on this, but I think it's the second earliest season to open, and it's one of the longest seasons for whitetail in the country. You can shoot 5 bucks a year with rifle. It used to be unlimited bucks. Like 7-8 years ago, you could shoot 20 bucks in a year, no problem. You can shoot 17 deer. I think that is right. Don't hold me to that number, but it's roughly 5 bucks, and then the rest does that you can shoot in a year. And you can run them with hounds. We've got areas where guys throw dogs out and surround big blocks of woods and run them with hounds. And then, like the area I hunt, I am very fortunate. One of my best friends his family owns a big property in the Congaree River Basin. And there's probably 10 or 15 people that hunt in there. But then the surrounding 8,000 acres, there's another 60 or so guys that rifle hunt, from the beginning of the season to the end in that river basin. And it's certainly not public ground, but it is highly pressured. The process here for most guys is a food plot, a big spin feeder, and like one of those Texas tower type stands. And they'll have 3 or 4 of those in the swamp. And that's how most of the guys hunt here. It's a lot of club mentality, which I have really enjoyed watching you guys, you and Johnny and the deer camp. Man, that's so much fun. It just really is a lot of fun, and it brings it back. Not to jump on a soapbox, but we get so enamored with chasing these giant deer and doing everything we can on these big deer and seeing the refreshing hunt camp thing. We're, still getting after it, but you guys, kind of bringing that back around. I don't know that y'all were the first, but certainly some of the guys I watched doing that, and kudos to y'all for that. That's pretty awesome.
No, thank you. And would you say that's comparable to the kind of the hunting club traditions in like South Carolina? Would you say that's similar? Very
similar to that. I'm in a club that's got a lot of father sons. My son goes down to our hunt club. We don't have a camp there because it's so close to our house.
Yep.
But some of the places do have cabins and stuff. Guys will come down and cook and, all that and sit around and tell war stories after the hunt. And we still do all of that. So
yeah.
It's a lot of fun. It is difficult for a bow hunter, to get into some of these areas, but it teaches you a lot. And so that's, it is gotten some valuable lessons out of that. But yeah, we do still have the hunt camp type feel down here.
Yeah, that's great. And that, to me, that was one of the reasons starting to share it because we've been doing that our whole lives, and from my dad and my grandfathers, and the whole way through of like, that's how deer camp has always been a part of things. And I think there's always a common misconception that they call camp hunters are, kind of not serious, lazy, kind of just go there to drink beer and hang out. And it's like, you can do a lot of things. You can be a serious hunter and still enjoy yourself, come back and tell stories. And to me, it's like having highly skilled people around me just makes me better, because I can bounce ideas off of. And whenever, what it's like when you're grinding for a while, especially say during the rut or something, and sometimes you just need a different perspective. You know what to do, but your mind's not letting you go through those systems, and it helps to have others that are there. And then I really come to like the aspect of our gun season that's 2 weeks long, so a lot shorter than yours, but at that point of making it less of a solo endeavor and getting together and making it of just a camaraderie based hunt, and to be able to help out whoever still has a tag left. And that's kind of like
awesome, man.
the goal.
It is so awesome, so refreshing. And I told Johnny, man, I gotta get up there and do one of those tracking things in the snow.
Yeah,
man, that would be so much fun. I've never done that before. We've tracked a lot of stuff, but not in the snow like that, and not whitetail. So that would be, I got to do that one of these days.
Yeah, man. And the hardest part about that is we don't get the snow as we used to. Like last year was an anomaly where the whole gun season we had snow, and I haven't seen that in years to be able to do that. But you find good snow like that, it's so much fun. And it's also nice after sitting in a tree for a long time to just not sit in a tree.
Get out and move a little bit, warm those feet up.
Yeah, and just to get to see what a deer is doing. You find a mature buck track, watching how he's working through the woods and seeing how he's navigating, because a lot of times you can visualize and think this is how they're doing something, but you can find a track and it's like, this is exactly what they're doing.
Sure. Yeah, man. That's good stuff.
No, it's pretty cool. But going back to South Carolina and hunting, whether it be the hunting club or your buddy's private piece there, those types of places, when there are a lot of people on it, I think there's always this common misconception with private land that's associated with, it's always premier as far as that you're just unpressured, you got these sanctuaries, and it makes it, but that's not always the case.
No. It's definitely not the case. I mean, it's so hard to get a buck to 4 years old. It's so hard to do that. And in my experience, the ones that have that move in daylight gene outside the rut or even in the rut, they get killed as 2 and 3 year olds around here. Especially a 10 point, that's the thing. It doesn't matter if he's a year and a half, 2.5, or three and a half. If it's a 10 point, buddy, he is getting it.
Oh yeah.
So it is challenging. But man, if you see the smiles on these guys' faces when they kill a 10 point, I mean, heck yeah, good, good for them. That's what it's all about, right? They are happy and over the moon. Not better than anything. It just, I'm personally looking for an older, more mature type buck, and it's hard to do. They are here, and I'm actually hunting one now that's going to be 6, and I have not laid eyes on him in 3 years. I've got a million trail camera pictures of him, but I have not laid eyes on this buck yet, and he will move a little bit in daylight, and it's just been his nomadic behavior that has kept him alive. There's lots of guys hunting around here with rifles that can see 200 and 300 yards away in these cutovers and clear cuts. And he has evaded people. He's been a 10 point since he was a 3-year-old, and he is evaded and evaded and evaded. And, he's a difficult deer, but that's one, I did not shoot. Let's see. I did shoot a deer in South Carolina last year. I did not shoot. No, year before last I did. Last year I did not shoot a buck in South Carolina. because I'm just focusing on him.
Yeah, and there's a couple things there. One, I think it's a good point of like with you focusing on that deer, someone like yourself that's been bow hunting for so long and has a ridiculous wall. I've seen photos of mature deer, to go a season without shooting a deer because it is that difficult to target one specific deer and be able to shoot them.
No, man, it is, and to each his own, right? So,
Yep.
lots of guys want to kill, and I had some success in Mexico and in Texas later in the year, but during the peak of the South Carolina season, I just, it was just day in and day out. It's very convenient for me too. I'm able to go a lot. I mean, the property is less than 15 minutes from my office, so I'm able to,
Nice.
go in the mornings for a couple of hours if that's all I can get in, or slip out a little early from work and get in, in the afternoon. So I'm able to go a lot when the conditions are right, and just have not run into him. And hopefully I'll get some pictures of him early here and can get a crack at him. Every year I feel like I'm getting closer and closer and closer, and have some strategies on how I'm going to go after him this year. And it'll be neat to get him. And, if I don't, hats off to him. If he vanishes, he won, and kudos to him.
Yeah. Did you, do you go looking for his sheds or anything? Did you find them?
So I don't do a lot of shed hunting, and two reasons. We have these giant cutovers that are like impenetrable, like you can't get in them. You can, but you have to turn around backwards. It's all catbrier, and we call them like witches' sticks. They're those big sticks that have just gnarly thorns all over them.
Oh,
and,
my dad kind of like Devil's Club?
Yeah, my dad used to
thing.
always threaten he was going to break them off and whoop me with one of them. It'd have killed me. But so yeah, it's hard to get into the areas, the bedding and stuff where they do a lot of their shedding. If I'm doing some mineral stuff, or if I'm out moving some stuff around, I kind of look in some of the hardwood areas, and I found a few, but no, I did not find his sheds.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, and I'm sure you're busy with shows and stuff that time of year, and it's just like kind of got to pick your poison on when spending the time. But with that deer specific, we'll use this as an example, but I feel like it could apply across the board. You talked about how others are hunting kind of the standard of the big blinds, the feeders, the food plot, and the swamps. What have you found differently? Like what do you? I know it's probably very different depending on each deer, but give a little bit of insight, like how you're hunting this deer and then how you're hunting some of these deer in general.
Yeah, for sure. So I know the deer will not come to feed in daylight, and all these, not all of them, most of the guys have feed out, corn feeders, whatever. He will not come to a corn pile or a feeder in daylight, period. He will come in dark, and I think that gives people hope. Yeah. Is that, oh man, if we can just get a cold front, he's gonna come in, or he's gonna mess up and come, but he will not come to feed in daylight. So always and never, right? Yeah. He has not done that I have seen on or heard, because they run a lot of cameras in the swamp, and quite a few people know about this deer, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds of pictures of him, and they're all at night. The way I have looked at it, Beau, is kind of my system or philosophy on whitetail hunting, especially where they're really pressured, is you have the first thing you have to do is get them to move in daylight, right? To kill them, you gotta have them moving in daylight. Simple, common sense. When is the best time for that? So they're in my mind, there are two periods. We start August 15th. So there's still some bachelor groups going on there. They're velvet. They haven't been hunted in 6 months. Now we do get guys that come down and start doing stuff 2 days before the season, and it kind of warps them a little bit, but you have an opportunity then. So I will try and find natural food. We get muscadines. We get a few sawtooths that'll start dropping. We get the edges of some of those cutovers that have some catbrier and stuff. So I will try and find some early seasoned food that he naturally browses on, especially if we get muscadines or a wild grape. I don't know if your listeners will know what muscadines are, but anyway, we get a good quote unquote hatch of those right around the beginning of the season. And if you can find a big grove of those, man, that is like crack to them. They'll come to that naturally. So we'll try that early. And then what I have done over the last couple years is really focus on funnel type settings, and especially as much time as I've spent with Bobby over the last few years. You know, he's 72 years old, mountain man, big woods, rut funnel, just figured out how to hunt the big woods and how to hunt rut funnels and identify funnels and get trail systems that all converge. And so I'm able to kind of parlay that into some flatland stuff, find some big ditches, some oxbows. And then what it's going to boil down to is I've got 2 of those spots that over the last 3 years I've had cameras in, and I've gotten 1 or 2 daylight pictures of that deer going through those spots. So I've already set 1 of them up. I've got 2 more to do, but I'm going to do some brush and some hinge cutting in those type areas. You don't have, on public and stuff, you can't cut, but you can stack brush, move limbs and that sort of stuff just to tighten them up. And what I mean by that, there's like a big oxbow in the lake, in the river, where the river bends and shifts deer travel. But then there's a big drainage ditch that comes off of it too. So it pinches it down on 2 sides. And then there's a fairly new cutover on the other side that, he's not going to want to walk in, especially in daylight. And so in that little run right there, I can tighten it up with a little bit of hint. And there's 5 or 6 trails that go through there that are pretty heavy trails. And I'm going to be able to tighten them up just with some hinge cutting and stacking some brush. And so I'll have a north wind and a south wind stand. And in those 3 spots, I'll have, some cameras in there. And then it's just going to take persistence, man. I'm just going to have to hunt those spots. The bouncing around doesn't work. Trying to find where he beds doesn't work. He's bedding everywhere and anywhere. You'll get a picture of him over here, at night, and you're like, okay, he's bedding in this big cutover. And then it'll be over here right at daylight going into another area. So he's nomadic, and that's what's kept him alive. So I feel like really deep down, the way to kill him is to be persistent in 1 or 2 spots, and just stay there. And when the rut gets going, another time when they are prone to move in daylight, I'm going to, if I have the ability and the right wind, I'm going to be in, one of those 2 funnels, even though it's flat land. And I think that's my best crack at getting him. If I don't get him early season on some natural food, then it's going to have to be a real persistent grind struggle to kill him coming through one of those funnels.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. I felt like it was just not that long ago that I heard of Bobby Worthington, and which is, I mean, I've heard a lot of the older guys that have been pioneers in this space, and I came across some of Bobby's stuff, and I've heard the name, but I didn't know a whole lot about what he was about. And I watched a few videos and listened to him talk, and I'm like, man, it makes so much sense. It was funny. I've told it on here before, but when I was younger, I would find these rut funnels in the big woods, and just because I'd only have a couple of spots I'd find were good, but I'd sit there for the whole week off that I'd have, and I'd always get an opportunity. And I started getting information, other podcasts and videos and stuff from anything can work in different areas. I'm saying, specifically to what I was doing, I started bouncing around a lot more, and first sit, best sit, all this stuff. And it was like, during the rut, that just doesn't work in the big woods. Like it just, or in areas like what you're talking about there. And it's like, before I knew all this stuff, I was better at it then. And I went back to doing that and putting it in cycles of, like, it's hard, especially when you scout a bunch of places or you have a bunch of what you think are good spots, that you always think that next spot's better. At that point, it's just a mental thing of being able to sit in those places. And I like the way that you just explained it there, and also the way that I've I've listened to Bobby explain it. I got to buy his book yet. That's one thing that I want to do and read it.
I'll send you one. We ship all the books out of my warehouse. So I can, when we get off here, just text me or message me your address. I've got some that the cover's a little bit bent, and I can just send you one. That'll be no problem.
Well, awesome. Thank you. I
sure.
definitely don't expect that. But I just, his like that simplicity mentality of it. It's not a overcomplicated, like super crazy tactic and things. It's just like the persistence, finding those places, and the way he explains of getting those trails together. And I was watching a video, I think he had done it with the Southern Outdoorsman guys, where he was like backtracking the trails out and finding at the furthest points away where they were at, but they were still in bow range, and going through it. And it was just like looking at those funnels in a whole nother level of spending more time and versus just being like, oh, this is a good funnel, there's a good tree, actually spending that time in those places. And I put a lot of that into even my scouting this past spring, was going in areas I knew were good. And instead of like trying to cover 12 miles just to really say I covered 12 miles across the board, of spending 4 or 5 hours in these small areas and just really getting to know it better.
Yeah, dissecting the trail system.
Yeah.
That's what it's about, and finding some geographical feature like a big ditch, a bluff, a drainage, this forcing movement. And then you'll have 3 or 4 long range trails, and when these bucks are in the rut and they're up moving between does or before the does get going or towards the end of the rut, and it seems like with weather patterns nowadays that getting close to Thanksgiving, in the Midwest seems to be a little bit better than the 1st of November, especially when those big deer are looking, more for those last few does. The problem is a lot of them have been killed by then. So you do run into that. But I agree, with that philosophy for rut hunting. Certainly not the only way to kill deer. It's a way, and it's one that makes a lot of sense to me, and ones that I've implemented heavily over the last probably 4 years and have been really successful in the rut. I hear a lot of guys say, man, I hate the rut. I stink at the rut. I got deer running across highways, running across open fields, and all that's true. But man, when you are in a funnel that's forcing them to do that, if they're going from one big wood lot to another big wood lot, they don't have a choice. They have to come. If they're going through there, they have to come through there. But he only may do it one time.
Yeah,
right. He may do it one time, but and that's where, the big thing is the persistence and staying there. He's got a graph in that class that he throws up on a board, and he goes, okay, the first one is just like 5 trails going across a piece of paper, if you will, or a topo. And then he throws a big ditch in it, and like 5 of the trails go around that ditch, and your odds have gone up like 40% or 60% on that particular thing, because you've got that many more trails coming around that feature. And then he goes, okay, that's all fine and good, but let's say you're only able to hunt on the weekends. And then he takes like 3 of those buck trails out of there. You're only able to hunt once a day on the weekend. And it almost goes back to a shot in the dark, right? I mean, we got to get out there and go. But the persistence and being able to stick to those rut funnels during the rut is the key to that style of hunting and what I have found.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, there's so much information out there, and I feel like a lot of people know a lot more than they think they do, even with like, say, younger hunters or newer hunters that are coming into it or newer to a certain style. I'll get messages during the rut specifically, because it's like everyone's taking vacation. They're like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And they lay out this scenario and like, what do you think I should do? I'm like, keep doing it. Like look to me, at least not knowing anything else than what you said here, it looks like you're doing the right things. It's just time is a big part of that for sure.
No, it is absolutely right. Yeah, and back to the whole funnel thing, and we can move on. I know your listeners will get tired of hearing us talk about rut funnels. But good. Even Fred Bear, he did a lot with a lot with big game, elk and bear and sheep. He talks about an article he wrote that, if you want to be successful in whitetail, find a deer run and set up, back then they hunted on the ground. There were no tree stands, set up by a deer run. And if you have a spot on both sides of the deer run, then your chances can go up because you can hunt different winds on that deer run. And if you really want your chances to go up, find where two deer runs intersect. And how simple is that? But it's so true. And then you extrapolate that even more and look at trails that aren't just doe trails going out to feed, but are actually those deep, long range, big woods. It doesn't have to be big woods, but big trails that are connecting blocks. Man, if you can find where 3 or 4 of those come together, think how you've increased your odds. And normally where you find 3 or 4 of those that come together is some type geographical feature, like a big river or an oxbow in the river, like a big ditch, like a big drainage, like a big bluff. That's where it's going to force those trails together. And buddy, that is your rut spot.
Yeah, it's funny, no matter where you go, you can find those, you're talking about flatland, or you can talk about the mountains, or you can talk about the big woods or ag country. When I was out in Iowa here recently, completely foreign type land to me, Rendell and I walked, and there was this oxbow and this creek that went around there, and it was like there was like 6 trails that X'd at that spot, and then like a little bit over there was another couple trails. I mean, everything was in bow range. I was like, well, big scrape right there. I was like, this makes sense. I think this would be a pretty good spot.
Yeah.
It just yeah, and I feel like you can find that across the board, and especially looking at the trails from a simplification side of it too, of like, all right, you start finding a bunch of trails meeting here, there's got to be some sort of reason for it.
Yeah, for sure.
The other thing that you had mentioned about with this deer and then just in general with hunting him was that looking at, he only came through, he had a few daylight photos of him or whatever. How much are you putting that annual data into your like game plan for like the following year? Do you put much weight on that as far as the dates or weather or anything else?
Man, I'll look at some of that. I'm a little bit of a nerd and trying to look at all of it.
Yeah.
I have not seen, I hear a lot of guys say that, and I have not seen that myself personally in the Midwest or here in South Carolina. The repetitiveness of a deer showing up within the, kind of the exact same time. There's a lot of guys that are really good in the bow hunting or whitetail world that do say that and actually have the pictures and stuff to prove it. So I'm sure that it does happen. And I just personally haven't seen that. I just think, again, you've got to find that funnel spot and know the deer's alive. That's the two things that I want to find that spot that if he comes through this part of the property, he is going to have to come within bow range of me, and that I know that he will move a little bit in daylight in the rut. So that's, I haven't, certainly, man. I mean, don't think that at night at 3:00 in the morning, I'm not looking at all of his pictures from 3 years and going, all right, he was here, and it was high pressure and it was 32 degrees. And then he was only 400 yards away with the same type weather. He's got a home range that he moves around in, but he's just super nomadic again. And what I mean by that is there's no rhyme or reason, to his movement. I mean, I can, we get crazy hot weather here, and, I've got the cell cameras, right? And it'll be a 94-degree day in September. And, and this doesn't happen much, but it'll be 3:00 in the afternoon. Bam, there's one picture of him, at 3:00 in the afternoon. And you're like, what is going on? Yeah. And then it'll be, 2 months of night. That if I get any pictures of him at all, and then it'll be, a 28-degree day in South Carolina, which is unheard of, a perfect northwest wind, just everything is great, and not a single sighting anywhere. And so he's just a weird deer.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely makes it hard to put any of those rules of thumb,
Yes.
on them there. And yeah, I was asking about the annual data. That's because that's something that I know I put a lot of weight on, that I see
Yep.
is like a lot of consistency with those annual times. I think a lot of it, like most of it, when I'm seeing those are around does coming into estrus and being in areas that have relatively low deer numbers. Those deer numbers are getting higher, but those specific doe groups, and a lot of those does are making it even on highly pressured public year after year and going through, and they tend to come in at those same times. I think that's where I see a lot of it in relation to, or at least that's my belief. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that makes good sense. And if we had Don Higgins on this podcast right now, he'd hit me in the back of the head, because and that guy's as serious about whitetail deer hunting as there is, and he is all about some historic stuff. I mean, a lot of times he'll call his shot and say, I know that this 8-point is going to show up on December 5th to the 9th. I know he will be right back in here. And 9 times out of 10, that deer is.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and and that all again comes back to there's no one way to skin a cat. And I think even learning the areas that you're hunting, because everything is so specific, it's wild to me. I mean, I can even go 10 miles to a different place and it be completely different, or see, different trends and things. So that's what's super cool about it.
No, it is, man. I've been very lucky to hunt in from basically Montana, Alberta, South Carolina, Texas, Mexico, Illinois, and it's so awesome to get to experience different deer and how deer act different, and different terrains, and the culture of what they do. It's fascinating. Again, we're addicted to the whitetail buck.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing to be addicted to. There's certainly a lot worse.
Oh yeah, there definitely is. And that was something I did want to talk to you about, from someone that's hunted whitetails in so many crazy places. I mean, you've hunted them in Mexico too, haven't you?
Yep.
Are those technically whitetails there?
They are, yeah.
Okay.
It's right over the border from Texas. It's still kind of in that golden triangle.
Okay.
So it's just from Laredo, Texas. It's 30 minutes over the border.
Gotcha. And spending so much time in these different, I mean, you talk about Alberta to Mexico, I mean, completely two different places, to South Carolina and the Midwest and everywhere in between. Are there certain consistencies that you see across the board, or are there things that you expect to see when you go hunt those places? Or are they just like whitetails, just so completely different in those environments?
Yeah, they are different. And I think a lot of it has to do with pressure. I think that has a lot to do with it. Like in Mexico, for example, it's absolutely flat brush. You wouldn't think a rabbit could live out there, and there are some incredible bucks. And outside of the rut, it's actually the hardest to hunt them in the rut in Mexico, because they're out running and there is no funnel structure. So they're coming to feed, and if they're coming to feed in a certain area, man, 9 times out of 10 they're going to be there every day. That's been my experience. If you took that same tactic and dropped it over here in South Carolina, man, he's dead as a 1.5 old or 2-year-old.
Yeah.
He ain't making it to 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. And those deer learn that, and they would never do that. But you can shoot a 5 and 6-year-old buck, because there's not the pressure.
Yep.
We're talking 30,000 acre ranches that maybe, and again, this is my experience. There will be an exception to this rule. A 30,000 acre ranch that maybe 20 people hunt on, 3 or 4 days each for the season. And they haven't bred that pressure instinct, into them, where the moms aren't teaching the fawns about staying away from this and coming into this like this and that sort of thing. So that's one example. If you look at, You look at, let's say in Illinois, the terrain there is so much different. When you get in the Midwest, we've got so much cover, like
Yep.
there's so much cover, and out there it's the opposite. They've got so much food and a little bit of cover. So it's again, I don't want anybody to yell at me, but it's easier to hunt deer in, say, Kansas or Illinois for me because, and for a lot of guys, not just me, but because there's not so much cover, right? There's a lot more ag, and once the crops are out of the fields, it limits their ability to navigate terrain. Whereas you take a giant big wood setting, a hardwoods or big river swamp where there's cover everywhere, and you're trying to bow hunt these things, man, it makes it a lot tougher. Now, if we took a Illinois buck and dropped him in South Carolina where he had all that cover, would he be just as difficult? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I do know that the pressure and I'm just using Illinois as an example. We could say Kansas or Ohio or Indiana. I do know that the pressure those animals see throughout a season is not the same amount of pressure as, say, a Michigan or a Pennsylvania or a South Carolina. So in my brain, taking all that into account, pressure is what makes the deer different. I'm sure we could go to some farms in South Carolina that are super hyper managed. The deer do get to 5 and 6 years old. It's like a 5,000 acre plantation where they've got all the nutrition in the world. There's a huge plan in place. And I bet we could get on some daylight 5 and 6 year old bucks there because they don't have the pressure. So that's what I would say is what really makes them different from different parts of the world.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it's funny talking about where you're at, where it's super thick everywhere in that flat ground. To me, that's some of the hardest hunting. Like when it comes to, I've hunted a lot of big woods areas that are relatively flat, and I hate hunting those areas. Yes, it's nice to not have to hike, up like as far as physically, but from a even finding those funnels per se or bedding and stuff, it's like if you give me the steepest country out there, bedding is way more predictable than it is in areas that are more rolling or flat that have a bunch of cover around, because it's just like there's a lot of good spots for them to lay down. There's a lot of good spots. As Johnny says a lot of times, he goes, I don't think these deer know what they're doing half the time. They just get up and they just kind of wander around through it. There's browse everywhere. There's food everywhere. It's like,
yeah. There's food everywhere and there's cover everywhere. And but that goes back to our point, right? When it becomes overwhelming, don't make it overwhelming. Mm-hmm. Find 4 or 5 trails that go around a natural feature and hunt them during the rut when they're apt to move in daylight. So it's an oversimplified approach, but man, it can be a deadly approach.
Joe, there's an example. I got to watch because the deer's still alive, so I got to be careful exactly how I explain this story. But there's an area that I've hunted for a long time, and I've known the area. I've killed bucks in there, but I always struggle. Like it was always like there's big deer there, but it's so hard to hunt because it's relatively flat and it's just big timber. There's not even any feed trees. There's no oak trees, nothing. It's just browse. And it's taken years of going in there. And finally I started finding some of these like consistencies in these certain spots. And I started going through and really breaking it down and to like, all right, there's just this little depression. It's only 2 or 3 feet lower than the areas around it that come up, and it meets this edge of this clear cut, and there's some different timber over here, and there's some different timber here, and it's like there's a lot of edge, just a little bit. There's a blow down tree right here, and like I'm like, okay, I start putting all this stuff together, and then the first year I'd hunted it, I'd seen him, but he was out, in that spot. He was out of bow range, and I'm like, okay, and then last year went in there, really started fine tuning it in the spring, and when it came to hunting season, then it was like, that was like I'd found the tree I needed to be in for certain wins. I gotta still fine tune it a little bit there, and had the shot opportunity on the buck. I just misjudged the yardage and missed him, but it was like that worked. And it's like when I went back in there, even scouting this past year, it was like I didn't really need to cover as much or worrying about like what's this deer doing at all these different times of the year. It's like, all right, I know instead of racking my brain and going crazy, not being able to figure out all this time, it's like, all right, I know that if I sit in this area for this 7 to 10 day window, I'm probably going to have an opportunity. It's so that was my goal this year, finding different wins on how to hunt it and different, so I can maximize that potential.
Yeah, you're stacking the odds, right?
Yep.
You're stacking the odds and bouncing around during the rut. Look, any tree in the woods can produce a buck in the rut. Any tree in the woods can produce a buck in the rut. But if you want to stack the odds and it to be consistent, what you're talking about, that blowdown tree, you could drag another tree in there to it, right? Or a couple trees down brush and tighten that thing up even a little bit more. And then all of a sudden that 40-yard shot becomes a 25-yard shot just because you added some brush. I mean, they're prey animals, right? They never know when they're going to have to run for their lives. I mean, it could be the next second. So they're always trying to conserve energy, especially those older bucks. They start getting arthritis in their shoulders and stuff. Now, they can go anywhere they want to go.
Yeah.
But they want to conserve energy, and especially, when they're rutting, and they'd rather walk around an obstruction than go through it. They will, but they would walk almost not twice as far, but they'd walk further to go around a big ditch than have to go down and up the other side. And so, being a prey animal like that, you can use that to your advantage because they're constantly wanting to conserve energy because they could have to literally run for their life at any second.
Yeah, man, that makes total sense. And yeah, so I'll be excited to see this year once you shoot that deer. That's wild. 6.5-year-old deer there. That sounds like a complete anomaly.
It's nuts, man. It is nuts. And we've got a small podcast called Mission Whitetail, and I've talked about the deer on that podcast numerous times, and I can't tell you the number of people at trade shows that have come up to me and said, "Is that old swamp buck still alive?" And I'm like, "Yes." He was January. Our season goes out January 1st, and he was still alive January 7th. But people are, because I think what it is, a lot of guys have had that experience with a deer.
Yeah.
They've had that one that they have struggled with, and maybe the deer vanishes, right? But the lessons you learn from that, and then if you are able to seal the deal, I mean, when you look at him on the wall, I mean that's. You're glorifying him because of the chase, but also, man, you did it. You stuck to it and you got it done. So pretty cool experience, and fingers crossed I'll get to tangle with him a little bit and finally see him in daylight. That would be a plus.
Well, I've found that in my point in my hunting career, if you want to call it that, I don't know if it's a good way of explaining it, but I'm still not at a point where I'm going to go all in on one deer to basically being okay with eating a tag of doing it. I have a certain class that I would want to be able to shoot, and the way I've done it is like I target one deer, I hunt that deer, another deer that's going to make me happy comes through, that's what I end up shooting, and I'm totally okay with that. But what I've learned from still chasing those specific deer and like hunting them as if that's the only one that I'm shooting is I learned so much more than if I was just hunting any deer per se, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense.
Just for me personally, I've found that I learned so much because those deer take you on these journeys, and usually are multi-year journeys and learning of what they're doing, and it also gives me that focus, that drive to make sure that I'm doing this prep work to go into it versus being like, oh, I'll shoot whatever, and knowing that I probably could shoot, a 2-year-old deer. And it's just, that's where I'm at my point, that you always want to continually, challenge yourself with it. And when I did that podcast with Lee Lakoski a month ago or so, like that was it's funny because we hunt totally different types of areas and everything, but it's still the same thing of chasing that challenge. And that's, I think I think most of us, at least, that's kind of a lot of our driving factor.
I keep stealing stuff from Bobby here, but he really has been a mentor. Human nature, humankind, we need a challenge. right? He talks about, he's an old mountain man, and it's so funny to be around him because his story. You've got to get him on the podcast, and
Yeah, I'd love to.
If you want to do that, I can definitely introduce y'all because I know your listeners would love to hear from him, and I'm happy to try and set that up. But he's very philosophical, and he talks about how humans need, or mankind needs, a challenge. We need a challenge, and he talks about when he was young that these actors and actresses, he's like, my gosh, they have the best world. They've got all the money, all the fame. I just can't imagine the life that they live. And then he'd read a magazine about them committing suicide or overdosing on drugs or whatever it is, and he said it finally dawned on me that they've reached a point that there is no more challenge, right? They've gotten all the money in the world. They've accomplished everything that they've wanted to accomplish, and that life becomes, almost stale, to them. And back to the, circling that back to hunting, is that we need a challenge. I think especially as men, it doesn't have to necessarily be in the hunting space, but a challenge that we wake up to try and meet, and that keeps us sharp, and it keeps us, maybe it's physical fitness, it keeps us healthy, or a business or a job or a goal you're going for, but some type of challenge that keeps you going. And whitetail hunting with a bow and arrow in pressured area is it might not be a challenge. It might be idiotic, but it's something that we do.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And I feel bad for people that don't have that, or don't have that thing, that hobby or lifestyle that just, I don't know. I can't imagine not doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. But, going back to you starting to kind of like even branch out and look at different opportunities, like was it whitetail specifically that wanted, I mean, I know you said the Africa side of things, but outside of that, for your own personal hunting, is it chasing whitetails in different places, or is it like you like seeing different places, experiencing new things? What is it for you that makes you want to go do that?
Just always had, a little bit of an adventurous soul. What's over that next mountain, and so, I'd read something about, the whitetail in the Milk River, Montana, and I would see some pictures in magazines and stuff like that, and I'd watch those Realtree videos of Michael Waddell and those guys on the Milk River, and David Blanton, and those were kind of, I'm older than you, but those kind of the things, and the Primos boys going out to the Milk River, and I was like, I have got to see that. So I would figure out a way to make enough money and find some guy that would let me come out there and hunt on his land. And I never got actually on the Milk River, but I got into some areas of Montana and those big alfalfa fields, and just fascinated by that. So tried that for 2 or 3 years. And then I'd see those big chocolate horn bucks that weighed 350 pounds in Alberta with snow on their foreheads. And all right, I got to figure out how to get up to the Peace River in Alberta and see one of these deer. And then Mexico, you'd see something down in Mexico, and, not even, I thought it was Coues deer, mule deer in Mexico. They're whitetail in Mexico. And then you see a few, and I'm like, all right, I got to figure out how to get down there. So I just always, been fascinated with that stuff, about going and seeing different stuff, and the adventure side of it. Just really, really love that. And it stirs me. Yeah,
man, I feel the same way with traveling. A lot of times it's as much about the place as it is the animal that I'm chasing, seeing new country, trying something different. Like it's so much fun, and to just when you've never seen it before, never thought you'd be able to, and to go do it. And one of the things like that, South Texas and in Mexico, like that brush country stuff looks so cool to me. Like that looks like such a cool place to chase whitetails around in, something completely different.
Man, it is. It's completely different style of hunting. Is it rewarding? Probably not rewarding would be the right way to say it, but is it fun? Oh my gosh, is it fun? I mean, when you can sit in a cactus flat in an elevated position and see 140, 150 inch deer coming out of these no man's land, and they're bristling up and they're snort wheezing, they're chasing, they're fighting. I mean, it is unbelievable, the whitetail experience, especially in the rut. But they're coming to feed, so it's not a challenging hunt at all. But it is a lot of fun. I enjoy it, and I get to take my son down there. Yep. There'll be a couple other guys in camp. We talked about that earlier. So is it rewarding? No, I could go shoot I did. I shot a 204 in Texas last year. Shot an absolute hammer. Got invited to this property. It was a huge property, 10,000 acres, completely managed, and it was a lot of fun. And I had never killed a 200-inch whitetail. It's my first 200-incher, and did it. Was it challenging? Was it rewarding? Not really. Would I have rather shot this 140-inch buck that I've been chasing in the swamp? 100% yes. From a challenge perspective, but from an overall experience and a fun experience, man, yes, that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, and I hope I get invited back next year. I'll go back and absolutely do it again.
Yeah. And no, we were just talking about, the challenge and pushing yourself towards those next, level goals and things. But there's also this aspect to me that I've come to learn of. There's certain things I love, like just really grinding it out as far as when hunting. And then I've also learned that I like ones that are less of that too, to mix into the balance of it. And also though that I always go back to, because I don't ever want to make it sound like, even with say like something like that Texas hunt, like those are ones that are, expensive hunts to be able to go do, and not make, excuses, or like have to put like a warning, like, oh, it's not really that hard, but it is at the same time, because you had to work your whole life and build up your businesses and everything to be able to afford to go do that. And I think that's a challenge in itself there, to be able to have those experiences, which I think is super cool.
And I've got buddies in Texas, and I'm sure you've got listeners in Texas that are going to listen to this and go, oh, wait a minute now. I've been hunting this buck for 5 years, and we feed the senderos, but man, he ain't coming out in that sendero in daylight. And I get it. I mean, there can be some areas where it can be super challenging. It's just a different world. I'm not saying that the state of Texas and Mexico and that style, it's just a different style of hunting. Yep. And I think all the guys in Texas would agree that if they were to come to Michigan and hunt there, it's just a whole different style of hunting and challenge aspect. But no, there's still deer, I'm sure, in Texas, Mexico, that get old and get nocturnal and give people fits to kill. I'm again, always and never. We can't say that. Man, every deer in Texas is easy to kill, because that's not the case. But you just look at kind of the generalities of that, and it'll be different.
Yeah, nope. I agree with that. To me, I don't know. Just in general, I don't look at any sort of hunting or any way someone does something and look at it any differently. It's just like that is a different experience, and if I want to do it, I'll try to figure out a way so I can get to experience that. If I don't want to, then it's not for me, then it is what it is. And there's
I love it. I had a lease in Texas for 12, 13 years. My son shot his first buck on that lease in Texas when he was 8. And I mean, there's hogs, there's coyotes, there's bobcats, there's a ton of deer. And again, the rut action down there it's almost like Disney World. I mean, there's bucks everywhere, and you get those red horn bucks coming through there, and they might have blood on them from fighting. I mean, it's awesome. I'll go every year that I can, for sure. It's December, which is a great time. The rut in the Midwest and South Carolina is over, and to get down there and experience the rut in December, and then down into Mexico even in January, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and this is kind of a little bit of a change in topic, but I don't want to forget about it. But did you have some affiliation or or involvement with the Moon Guide before?
Yeah, so I guess long story short, Adam Hayes and I have been really good buddies for a long time. We were both on the Matthews Dominant Bucks show back in the day with Tom Miranda and Stan Potts. And he and I met out there, became good friends, started doing some hunting together. And we followed the Moon Guide back then. He did, Andre did, a lot of the guys followed the Moon Guide. And Jeff Murray was the guy that created it. If you know all this, tell me.
No,
to stop. Okay, so Jeff Murray created the Deer Hunter's Moon Guide, and he got a very rare, like blood cancer, I believe it was, and he ended up passing away. Well, Jeff and Adam had become very good friends over the years, and Jeff's wife came to Adam and said, "Look, I'm not going to be able to handle this. Would you be interested in buying the Moon Guide?" And Adam called me and said, "Hey man, I think we got a good opportunity here. Would you like to, go in on this?" And so we ended up buying it from her. And crazy, man, I bought it in like August, and the plan was just to shelf it for that year. Just buy it so nobody else could buy it. Get it in August. It was I thought too late to get anything printed, and I was like, all right, we got it. It's ours. We'll resurrect this thing January, February, and then launch it next year, relaunch it. And man, all of a sudden, my sporting adventures, my outfitting phone starts ringing. "Hey man, you got any Moon Guides?" I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, "Well, Cabela's carried them, and they told me that they weren't carrying him anymore. I needed to call this number," which wasn't mine. It was the Murray's number.
Yep.
She said, "No, I sold it to this guy, and here's his number." And dude, this was happening 5 and 6 times a day. And then all of a sudden, I get an Amish guy. I didn't know he was Amish at the time, but he had a very odd accent. And he said, "Hey, I need to order a Moon Guide." And I said, "Sir, we're not going to have them this year." And he goes, No. I've followed this thing my whole hunting career. I have to have it." And I said, "Well, sir, where are you from?" And he told me it was Ohio, somewhere upstate Ohio, I believe. And I said, that's an interesting accent. He said, "Yeah, I'm Amish. I guess it's German. What is it, Beau? Is it German or some type of?"
You're asking the wrong guy.
Anyway, off getting derailed here. But I'm like, "Amish, y'all are horse and buggy, right?" He goes, "Yeah, I brought my buggy to a payphone, and I called Cabela's. Then I called the Murrays, and now I'm calling you, and I've been here at this payphone." And I'm like, all right, this is wild. This is a cult type product. So I called the guy that produced them. I was like, "Dude, can you do 1,500 of these things? And, I'll pay you to expedite them. Let's just get them ready for the season." And Adam and I got the whole formula and went through, sent him everything. And sure enough, we got them and sold all 1,500 of them, and then had ticked off people that we didn't have any more. And I'm like, okay, here we go. So we kind of modernized it and started using, I'm not sure, we had email lists and stuff. I'm not sure social media was a big thing yet, but I feel like Facebook was starting to go. So we started advertising on social media. Long story short, resurrected it, got it to a pretty sustainable business through our different channels. And then I sold it or my portion of it to Adam, and now he runs it fully.
Okay. Awesome. And because I'd heard something about you having involvement with it, and it's honestly something that, other than my dad kind of giving his thoughts with it, that he follows through it, I haven't really talked to anybody about it. But obviously you're a believer in it then, as far as the moon and effect.
First and foremost for me is weather, even in the rut. I'm a weather guy, and I killed a couple really big deer in Illinois. Both of them were high pressure, good weather afternoons with a red moon. And red moon, for your listeners that don't know what that is, that's an overhead moon during basically prime deer moving hours, dusk and dawn. So this was a dusk moon overhead, straight overhead. And and I killed those 2 really big ones. And I definitely pay attention to the moon. I also don't put blinders on either. There's been quite a few studies that have come out. I think Mississippi State maybe did one, and what's that guy? I respect the heck out of him. It's not James Kroll. It's I can't remember. He's good friends with Don Higgins, the biologist that did that. Do you remember his name?
I know who you're talking about, but I can't think of it off the top. He's from down south, isn't he?
Yeah. He's a great guy, super smart. It'll come to me at some point, but
I need my Jamie of like the Joe Rogan. Be like, hey,
yeah. Exactly. That's exactly right. Oh, Bronson Strickland.
Okay.
Yeah, got it. Bronson Strickland, and he did that study, and he has come to the conclusion that the moon has zero impact on deer movement based on thousands of radio collar deer and how much they moved. I mean, I think you can poke holes in a lot of those studies, and I'm no deer biologist, and I didn't run any of these studies, so I don't know. I think there is something to the moon. I think the gravitational pull has an effect on maybe triggering some wanting to get up and feed type stuff. I know it does with fishing. I know it does with the tides. Is that a whitetail deer? No, it's not a whitetail deer. I don't think it can hurt anybody one bit paying attention to the moon and see if it helps them with success. And I tell you, a way you can do it is to go back and, there's historical moon data, and you're looking for that overhead the moon guide. I mean, you can go into their app. It's very inexpensive. And you can look at your trail camera pictures from last year, some daylight pictures, and see how it correlates with the moon. And if it gives you confidence, man, I'd say go with it. It's certainly not going to hurt anybody. And it could put a really big deer. I mean, I think even Lee Lukoski, I don't know if you talked with him about this, but I know he's killed some big deer on the red moon. And I don't personally know Lee, but I know Adam, knows him. And Adam's knocked down a bunch of giants. I think he's got 15 or so Boone and Crockett's, and he was using the moon guide long before he owned it. And Andre DeQuisto, another one, Lone Wolf Custom Gear. He's knocked down some absolute monsters and got a wall full of them. And he's a big moon guide guy. So, yeah, man, I don't think it can hurt anybody. I think as many tools as you can have in your chest, the better off you are. But I'm a weather guy over everything. I need rut. I need temperatures 5 or so degrees colder than the average that time of year, and then I feel like I'm in the chips and I got a really good chance.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I like the way that you explained it too, as if it's not it's not one thing that's making that impact, but also, and it gives you that confidence. It's funny because something I've never paid attention to, but I learned that my dad is. It's funny. I have a film coming out that he talks about, or I talk about this with, and it was like, yeah, I just learned that my dad has 15 years of journaling on moon data, and why he believes it was just something that I didn't realize that he even did, but he's like a huge proponent of it, and just keeps, it's not, he's not only hunting when he gets the prime moon days, but he's using that in the overall process and the strategic planning with it, which is pretty cool.
I definitely think there's something to it, and I'm not a moon naysayer by any stretch. There are a lot of guys that'll die on their sword that the moon has nothing to do with it, and I think there's guys that'll die on their sword that say it has everything to do with it. I think if you're a well-rounded hunter, you need to pay attention to it and file some of those days away, especially if you're gonna if you've got a limited. It's one of the predictors. If you've got a plan, like a vacation to Kansas, and you're like, okay, I can see it's seasonally gotten warmer and warmer. So instead of going the first week of November, I'm going to go the second week of November. And man, we do have some red moons during that. You just kind of stack some things in your favor. And so it can help you with planning some out of state or some hunting time that you're going to take away from work.
100%. And I think when you have limited time, anything that you can do to help increase those odds, if you have the ability to choose the days or do anything that I think it's, and also again going back to confidence, I think there's so many things that if you really wanted to go through and potentially quote unquote debunk them, you probably could with some sort of research or data. But like, if it gives me confidence, I'm believing in it and I'm doing it, because that's when you go into the woods with more confidence. I don't know. It just seems like it works out more.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Good juju. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So the last thing here, and then we'll kind of wrap up, Joe, but what, I know you said that you're heading on a hunt here to Africa here on Monday at the time of recording this, but what about as far as whitetails kind of leading into the summer here? What do you got on the to-do list?
Yeah, man. So gonna be a fun year for sure. Gonna obviously start here at home August. Hopefully that nomad buck will be around and I can chase him some. But then I put in for Kansas and I had a point, so hopefully he'll get drawn there. Have got a couple permission spots up in Ohio, southern Ohio. And so that, those will be kind of the focus rut wise. Early season outside of South Carolina, I've got a buddy up in Alberta that I'm going to go up there and hunt with in that northern Alberta area. I mean, those 300-pound bucks that are on alfalfa early, I mean, they're so fat, they've got cellulite, they're just grubbing. So hopefully can get up and get an arrow in one of those. Alberta's been hit or miss for me. I've killed some nice bucks up there, but also had some absolute bust up there as well. So I'm excited to get back up there this year. And then, man, hopefully finish up down in Mexico and Texas again. If I get the invite back to that ranch, I'll be headed back there in Texas and then Mexico for sure. I've already got that one lined up in December. So nice. Yeah, going to be a busy year. And then if y'all get some snow, I don't have to bring my gun, but I would love just to come up there and hang with you boys and drink a beer and eat some good food and watch y'all track deer in the snow. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Oh, that'd be an absolute blast. You're welcome up anytime, but you got to bring a gun. Otherwise, there's no way to shoot a deer.
This is true. This is very, very true.
No, that would be awesome. And I did want to comment on Alberta, because so I've hunted the bow zone twice now, and I have yet to shoot a buck there. And I'm like, I have. It's crazy, because it was first year I was there, I literally saw pushing 200-inch whitetail the first hour of the first day, and I was like, is this what Alberta is? And then it was a little bit, it was more difficult as it went through, and temperatures down -15, -20 degrees. I mean, just November type nasty. But sure, those deer are so big, the bodies, and like I've got this like want to just, I don't know, I just have this need, and a lot of it stemmed from, I remember reading, I think it was a North American whitetail back when I was a young kid. Like I wasn't even really, I don't even know if I was old enough to hunt yet, but I remember seeing Jim Hole Jr. on the front of it with a 200-inch whitetail from there, and that's who I ended up hunting with up there. So it was funny how it all came full circle to be able to do it. And Jim has become a friend, and I love learning from him, and someone who hunts whitetails completely different than myself, that I've learned so much from, that I do apply, even though we're hunting completely different. Like I love learning from people that have done it for a lot of years, and just pulling little things and applying it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I can remember reading those stories about Jim Hole and how he quiets all his gear down, because it does, man. It gets mouse quiet up there in that snow, and you can learn a lot. Man, you think you got your stuff quiet, and you don't know quiet until you've run a deer camp with Jim Hole. He'll have you good and quiet.
Oh yeah,
but no, Alberta's awesome, man. A lot of times we do a lot of glassing early, because we can get up there kind of the end of August and do quite a bit of glassing. And man, when you get in after you've seen a big one and you've looked at this 300-pound deer, and you get up in your stand, you look at your broadhead and you're like, man, is this thing going to get all the way through this deer? Yeah. I mean, they're massive.
Yeah, that is crazy. Well, Joe, I think we'll wrap this one up here, but I want to urge everybody to go check out the Mission Whitetail podcast and YouTube channel. And is there anywhere else you want to direct anybody to go check out?
Man, social media, Joe Miles Hunting, and man, anybody got questions about South Carolina, Mexico, Texas, anything like that? You know, I'm happy to always give as much intel as I possibly can. And man, I want to thank you for everything you do for our industry. And I've been listening to your podcast for a long time, a lot of road trips, a lot of long road trips, and you've been doing it for years and years and doing an incredible job. And man, I'm very humbled and appreciative to get included here, and thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, well, thank you for putting the time aside and doing this here with me, Joe. I really do appreciate it.
No, Beau, thank you, buddy.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, share it with your buddies. Leave us a rating, a review, and subscribe. If you want to check out more content like this, there's plenty in the links below. We truly appreciate having you guys along with us.